Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we have a look at the 1981 film Wolfen. This is episode 427. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So, warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castlebridge Media, home of the Castle of Horror anthology. With me from Austin is Tony Sabaggio, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, which you can find at Global Comics. He is a Best Writer Ringo nominee, Austin Chronicle Best of Austin Award winner, and a member of the PEN America Fellowship. Say hello, Drew.
Oh.
It's not wolves, it's Wolfen. And finally, also in Denver, color commentary from Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello. All right, Wolfen. Wolfen is a 1981 American crime horror film directed by Michael Wadley in his only directional feature film, based on Whitley Strieber's rather remarkable and very different 1978 novel, The Wolfen. Also quite short. I mean, it's like 250 pages long. It's not a long book. The film follows a city cop who has been assigned to uncover what is behind a series of vicious murders. Originally, it's believed the murders are animal attacks until the cop discovers an indigenous legend about wolf spirits. So I cannot wait to discuss this movie. This is a movie that I had kind of forgotten about, but has haunted me for years. And so let's. I mean, it came back to haunt me basically. So let's go, Tony, Julia, Drew, and then I'll go, Tony. It sounded to me like you maybe had not actually caught the HBO version of this movie back in the day.
Maybe. I know I saw it in a cut. I had to see it. It had to be in cut form. I'm pretty sure it showed on primetime TV, like network TV at night. I believe. At least once or twice, maybe on cable. But I think this might be only the second time I've ever seen it uncut, and I'd forgotten just how brutal it actually is. And it's a fascinating movie, both for the gore and there's so much here. There's cop drama stuff, there's buddy stuff, there's eco-terrorism, anti millionaire billionaire stuff, police state surveillance things, and influence into Predator. Like, I did not expect that it was so full of things, because when I was younger, we're discussing it, I kind of wanted a werewolf movie, or thought it was going to be a werewolf movie. It was kind of hyped with these wolves, and it's a different movie than that. But boy, does it have a lot going on. Yeah. I think I read the novel a long time ago, so I have very little memory of it. If I want to say I did, and I remember it being different, but that all I do remember is that it was different. But it was great to revisit this time as an adult, with like kind of watching where this influenced things, and then also just all the bits that it's trying. There's Native American stuff in it that's like, hey, we're this doesn't get caught up on as much on in the New York area. You usually kind of get this different places, but wow, is it jam-packed for warts and all, full of stuff that I can't wait to discuss, because it's really good. I think, again, for if you wanted more monster, you possibly would have gotten disappointed, but I think looking at it now, there's a lot, which is great.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Julia, what were your opening thoughts on Wolfen?
I think I saw this when I was younger, but I really don't remember. I didn't remember any of it. It's very interesting. A lot of what Tony said, I thought was really interesting. And then also, the Indian themes were fascinating. The fact that it uses, first film to use the thermographic visual photographic look is what they call it. Kind of, it's like a negative. It almost looks like a negative with what do you call it when infrared, kind of like infrared. But so that was really interesting as to show us the perspective of the Wolfen. And I'm trying to think what else I wanted to add because I know there was a couple of things, but oh, the cast. The cast was really really good. Apparently, Dustin Hoffman had wanted the job that Albert Finney, the part that Albert Finney got, and this is the
Huh.
first time Dustin Hoffman ever got turned like down for a role.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
um, and you said it was a short novel, but the first cut that Michael Wadley turned in was 4.5 hours before they started
Good
narrowing
Lord.
it down.
I mean,
So
this
apparently,
movie's 2 hours long. In
I
its
would
uncut
yeah,
version
it
that we're
feels too
seeing
long
here,
in 2 hours, and I was like, I don't know how he made 4.5 hours,
I
I
I
but
would like to see what ended up on the cutting room. Like
right,
yeah,
I think it's my guess would be more of the eco terror kind of back and forth, but the
maybe
juxtaposition between that and the Wolfen kind of stuff. But I don't I would probably watch it in chunks, but I would love to just see what the mind, of the director kind of put out there.
yeah,
With
um,
all of this stuff happening in the movie.
what
absolutely.
strikes me as
But
strange about this is it's 2 hours long, and if it were shown on network TV, as you mentioned, Tony, network TV movie block is usually 2 hours. In other words, you'd have to somehow
You have to
cut
cut
slice
cut a
like
like
bunch
30
more,
minutes.
cut a bunch
Yeah.
more, or make it a two-night thing. But anyway, but also Edward James Olmos is really interesting and has a very strange naked dance scene thing.
yeah.
Yeah,
And then
we get a little bit of Saltburn in there.
and then Gregory Hines and Tom Noonan really good. So it's a really good cast. Just really, I think it's well done. Yeah, I mean, it's even though it's only 2 hours out of the 4.5, it feels still like there's some stuff where it just kind of goes on a little bit, and then there's other stuff where you're just like, "Whoa, what just happened?" Like it went, we just skipped something, and yeah, that's part of that 2.5 hours, I'm sure, where you're just kind of like, I feel like we skipped forward in the story and missed an entire plot point. But
Yep.
but so yeah, but it was definitely interesting, and yeah, lots of good themes to explore.
Oh gosh, yes. Drew, what about you?
So kind of dovetailing off of what Tony was saying, I think that this is a very underrated movie. I think it gets categorized as a werewolf movie a lot, and there certainly is a lot of werewolf stuff in here, which will probably get more into. But I think this is more properly labeled an eco horror movie, like the rest of the ones that we've been doing
Mhm.
recently. And I think when you view it in that lens, it becomes a lot more interesting. What you have going on here is, a commentary on gentrification, but they also, loop in, habitat loss as far as these sort of super wolves are
Yeah.
concerned. And like Julia said, also amazing cast. Like this is just like, even in like some minor roles, like you have some really good character actors, and it's just, it's a joy to see them assembled here. Albert Finney is great and curmudgeonly, and just fun to watch. And I love his relationship with Gregory Hines's character in the movie. But I'm a fan. I like this. Just like last week I said, I have an affinity for alligators. I also have an affinity for wolves. So like I also just enjoy that part of this. So great animal attack movie as well. But lots of stuff here to discuss, and looking forward to getting into it.
So as my opening thought, I think I'll dovetail us into the conversation. Now, this movie came out in 1981. There's a weird curse for Whitley Strieber novels because this is a guy who writes a lot of novels that get adapted into extremely memorable movies that are not all that related to his novels, which I guess is both it's a blessing because Boku dollar is being thrown towards Whitley Strieber, but a curse because the movies are so different from his books. Like I read The Wolfen, and the book basically is about smart wolf people who are running in secret, and it's the same concept, except for that you spend half the time with the detectives who are trying to discover whether there's a secret somebody doing these weird slashings, and half the time with these smart wolves who like call one another by name and speak their own language and have their own rules and kick out a leader and bring in another leader, and have all kinds of sexual politics. And I mean, so imagine that. Imagine reading that book and think, gosh, how are they going to do the Wolf Society? And the answer is they're not. They're not going to do that at all. Where they're going to stay off the screen until you don't even see them. In the Grand Jaws tradition, you don't even see the monsters until very close to the end. But still, Strieber gets a credit, and good for him. I mean, and I just think that's big, which is very much like The Hunger, which is very different from that movie. So, okay, I just wanted to mention I saw this movie on HBO back in the day when it would play over and over again. So this would have been probably late 81 or 82. So I would have been 9 or 10. And I saw the the unedited theatrical version of this many times as a child, because I remember very clearly just being fascinated by the multiple dismemberments that happen in this movie, and especially the beheading. Like I took to the bank that whole thing that Gregory Hines says, where he's like, if they cut off your head, like there's a good chance that you'll stick around for a little while and see your own body.
I was like so hoping that was going to pay off, and it finally did at the end. I was so excited. Like,
yeah, I do remember that, but I remember I left the dialogue in for the other releases. I want to say that I probably did catch bits of it off and on when it was on cable, if it was on during the summer, but I really didn't remember how graphic it was. So I really think I did see the edited versions a couple times, but
or maybe
wow.
you just looked away and missed that part. I mean,
Who knows? Yeah.
I
well,
just
there's a
think
lot
it's
of
funny
parts.
though how
Literally,
HBO. What's that?
That's true.
there are a lot of parts. Literally.
Yeah.
I mean, HBO. I just think it's funny how HBO would just play anything and everything multiple times a week. So, and this was the era that I was apparently completely unsupervised and just watching HBO all the time.
Well, at this point in time, though, you have several factors in that. As as far as history goes, you got whatever you can license. So you
Yeah.
have a run in the same way you'd have a theatrical run. Like you have this, and you want this many viewers seeing it, and so it's gonna play like every 4 hours or 6 hours.
Yeah.
And then you've also got, if it was exclusive, you'd want to run that, or you might even want to run it more because on your sister channel, if it was like Cinemax or if it was movie channel or
Whatever they
whatever,
had at the time. Yeah.
you might sometimes you'd see the same movie on at the same time,
Yes.
or one would be spaced an hour apart to try to catch those viewers who were flipping channels
Isn't that
or
remarkable?
flipping the box. But a lot of that was to compete. Like, well, this channel has these movies and this other channel has these other movies, and where are you gonna see that if you had the premium, if you got all the movie channels, which were you gonna pick?
Yeah.
And so but a lot of it early on was just, here's what we got, so let's just show it. And what else?
Boy,
We don't have a lot of choices.
I really want to dig into it, and we'll have to do this on another show. It'd be really fun to dig into what was showing, in September of 1981 on HBO. That would be really fun to go through,
Right.
because you'd find a certain percentage of stuff that is still a classic, and a certain percentage of stuff that is so far fallen down the memory hole that it may as well not exist. And I think that'd be really fun. So we should set that idea aside, because I definitely want to do that. Anyway, but also, Drew, you mentioned eco horror. We've been talking about all these movies that were coming out in the late 70s and the turn into the 80s. This is 81, and it still is following along it's still fitting into that conversation that we've been talking about, right, with eco horror. So even though this is a fairly prestigious, expensive one, but talk to me about that, because and to set that up just a little bit more, it seems to me this is part of two trends. There's the eco horror thing, which is a wave that is cresting, and there's also this weird werewolf thing of the same year that is doing whatever it's doing. So put this movie into a context.
Well, you have American Werewolf in London and The Howling, which come out the same year as this, and this gets lumped in with those a lot. And I mean, to be fair to that, they do kind of play with your expectation of it possibly being werewolves for like the first half of this movie. Like
Yeah.
right down to Edward James Olmos doing the striptease thing that Tony was talking about. Like it's there's a full moon. There's even a mislead when the first people who are killed, you see Edward James Olmos like throw a bottle at their car from atop a bridge. So they're definitely playing with the where like expectations of a werewolf movie and some of the imagery of a werewolf movie. What this does not have is the usual themes of a werewolf movie. Werewolf movies tend to deal more with trauma, with identity, with all these sort of psychological things. This movie is much more concerned with the external, like what's going on in our world. We're in the Reagan 80s now. What does that mean? And that I feel like it does sort of go more back to Jaws, and even the way that the heroes are set up. Like now there are more characters in this that are central to the plot than Jaws, but they function the same way. You have this cop, and then you have all these experts, from like a psychologist to a zoologist to a forensics guy, and they're all working together to investigate this phenomenon that just happens to deal with an animal. And this even, I feel like, ties into the movie we just watched, Alligator, even though that movie's a B movie. And as you said, this is a much more classy kind of film. But, you do have the idea of when you take an animal out of its natural environment, it becomes much more monstrous. And, this movie also plays in with that. So I think this is definitely in conversation with both the werewolf movies and the eco horror movies, but I think it is much more properly viewed as an eco horror movie because of its themes. And I think, when you break those down, that's really a much more intriguing, interesting conversation to be had. And
I agree.
Yeah.
I want to talk for a minute about the so-called Confederacy of Experts. That was a term you used. I don't know if you invented that term, but it's this thing that we start to see in movies like this, and I'm thinking about movies like Manhunter, where as your detective bops around looking into this investigation, he meets a bunch of quirky characters, each of whom brings a skill, and which sort of borrows a little bit from the traditional heist movie. But you see you saw it a little bit in Jaws. You mentioned the guy who's a natural scientist, and the guy who's an expert boater, and a guy who's a police chief. In Manhunter, you'll have all of these guys who come together and use their skills, who stop in. And in this one, you've got all of these different scientists. And we're so accustomed in 2024, we're so accustomed to seeing those things that I don't think we think about it. But I think it was just beginning to become a part of the shape of procedural movies, where you would be checking in with all of these experts who would bring us science, some kind of science, to solving the crime that was different from the science that the next guy was going to have. Oh, speaking of Manhunter, we've got Tom Noonan playing a guy called Peter Wolf, who is the wolf dude, which is hilarious.
His name is actually Ferguson.
Oh, how did I get that wrong?
No, he says
because he gives him a fake name.
Oh yes, I'm so sorry.
He fakes the whole idea is he's like,
yes.
He's
Wolf.
trying to call. He
Peter
wants
Wolf.
to get He wants to get the fire department to come out so that he can get the wolves to howl.
That was so funny. That was a really great. By the way, I've seen big wolves at habitats in Colorado, and a full grown. I mean, maybe everybody knows this, but a full grown wolf is an enormous thing. It's like the size.
Yeah.
It's like bigger than a Honda Goldwing. It's
They
enormous.
have this great thing that they do at the Colorado Wolf Sanctuary, where you go, the guy will get the crowd to just howl, and then the wolves will howl back. It's so cool.
Yes, and they are freaking huge. I just didn't. I don't think I was aware of how big this animal was.
I agree. When I first saw one, the other one I thought is when I saw an actual crow in Japan, like the real thing.
Yes,
was like, oh, that's that's why there's legends and such.
Right.
Huge bird with the like beak. They're like, oh, that looks dangerous. Okay, I can see that, and they're
Yes.
really smart. But yeah, those when you have a legendary animal and you've seen maybe dogs that you think are big or whatever, and then you see whatever that animal is, and you see
Yeah.
them in captivity, or if you see them wild, like I don't know, a moose or something, you might go, oh, that's why
Yes.
people talk about this. This is actually really imposing and scary.
Yeah.
Although this movie does hand wave some stuff with Wolf. Like
Oh,
wolves do not have thermal vision. I mean, you can hand wave it away with them being not normal wolves, but
Yeah.
like that's an invention of this
Well, they also
I-
don't just
story.
randomly murder humans for no reason.
Well, the way
I
that
always thought it was that they're wolfen and not wolves. Like I always I
Exactly.
never really got, to me, like that always was, hey, this is a supernatural beast and you're seeing through supernatural beast vision.
Yeah, but wolves are also not ambush predators, they're pursuit predators. But like again, you can hand wave any of that away with it being a kind of a monster type creature. But I think wolves get as far as the size of wolves, I feel like they often get lumped in with coyotes, which are
Yes.
much smaller and less impressive looking.
Yeah, that was
And
my mistake. All totally fair, Drew. I was thinking of something roughly the size of a coyote, and
yeah,
no, it's closer
Although
to the
there were
size of a
coyotes,
cow than a coyote. And
yeah,
yeah,
there were coyotes howling the other night, not too far from there. They come
Yeah, we
through the
have
park
coyotes
here
all over.
around here. Yeah.
Yeah, we have coyotes all over the place around here.
So I wanted to mention also, and then we'll kind of get into a little bit. Well, to give a little bit of the plot, the film opens with a murder, and I do want to come back to with the way these murders are shot. We already referenced it a little bit with the curious wolf vision, but I want to talk first about who is the center of this investigation, and it is Albert Finney as the ultimate 1980s crusty jerkwad police detective. Right down to, like, I was once talking to a good friend of mine, and I said, I'm watching a 1980s serial killer movie. And I described a little, and he goes, I will bet you that movie will feature a scene where a detective is eating a donut around some bodies. And I mean, that
Sure
actually
enough.
happens here. Like, sure enough, in
Yep.
this
Well,
movie, yeah, he's eating
but it's usually
cookies.
reserved for the coroner or whoever's operating. Like, in fact, there's the whole it's meant to be like, oh, I've seen enough bodies, right? Like that's supposed to be
Right.
the hardened element. Like,
That's
and
But the
the
cops are
idea.
always eating donuts.
Whittington and Ferguson actually say, "Oh, you want to order a pizza?" He goes, "No, I want some ribs."
Right.
And like, you know, this whole thing. But yes, the donut part is pretty amazing. Although he gets cookies too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he's popping cookies in the morgue. Patricia
Oh
Cornwell
yeah,
had a
because
really,
he has little powder donuts, like the little
yes,
terrible, like
yeah,
I don't know,
breakfast
they're
of
not
champions.
terrible, but
Yeah.
they're cheap powder donuts, and then also cookies.
Boy, the city, just like in Alligator, by the way, the concept of urban decay. Hey, America, going to the malls, going to your multiplexes, watching movies. The city looks like shit. I mean, it looks unhealthy. Our hero looks like a guy who we see jog for about 10 yards and then give up and get some powdered donuts, and he looks like shit. The city looks polluted. There's rubble in the streets. I mean, it's when I hear people talk about in today's society about the urban hellscape that is the American city, I'm like, you either have no memory or only memory. Like, in other words, you're basically, I think, thinking of what we envision the cities as being like around this era in
Yeah,
1981.
70s, 80s New York. There were, I mean, the old Times Square.
Yes,
If you was legit, like that was not a place you didn't,
you didn't take your kids.
you,
There was no big
I
M&M
mean,
store. Yeah,
you might easily end up in a Batman's parents situation going to the opera, and like if you're going to, like, now you go to Broadway, yay! But like it
well, and the
wasn't
South
that.
Bronx was a disaster. The city
Yeah,
had essentially abandoned the South
I
Bronx. Buildings were
I had a
burning down all
friend.
the time.
Yeah, it took them a
Oh
Yeah.
bunch
yeah,
of years to
I had a
rebuild.
I had a friend who had stories about the blackout and stuff, like living through all of that, and block parties, like just all this stuff. He had the stories of late 70s, early 80s New York, and it was definitely depending on where you lived.
Yeah.
Was how safe it was, all of that. I mean, you can watch it. It was used as that example because it was dangerous. Partly in the some of it may be exaggerated, but there was a reason for that. But yeah, too often it's used for, like, remember, it's what the cities now are not the same cities by any
Right.
stretch. And I'm not saying that there aren't dangerous parts of every city. Like, I was just talking to somebody recently about how, depending on where you are in New Orleans, it's easy to get to a place where you're like, whoa, we should turn back now.
Yeah.
Just the way it works. I mean, when I was in Savannah, easily that too. Like, where I had some, but it's fast. The New York here is definitely vastly different. From these same, for some of these areas today, especially, I mean, Times Square is just totally
No,
different
Times
than it
Square has
used to
been
be.
complete, and depending on, there's a million reasons for that, and I definitely don't want to get into a debate with any listeners about what to think about Rudy Giuliani, but it is a
Right.
different time,
Yeah, I mean, there
and
were
yeah,
phases that led to that. Like, that historically, that's true, right? Like, for
One of,
better or worse. But yeah, I think it's interesting. It's interesting that they stop in this area, as a rich people on cocaine.
well, they
well, they're
said that they
stopping
got
Battery Park.
married. They said they got married there.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Right.
The thing about this, like, before we get too far away from the first kill scene,
Yes.
that I think is fascinating compared to all the other movies that we have watched, especially looking at this as a movie that adds in an element of the supernatural, is this movie is so much more like macabre in its nature and the way it
Say
like
more about that.
looks.
What do you mean by that? That's
So
interesting.
when you have this first kill scene, it's like alligator is gory, right? But it's not gory the same way this is. Like, it really, you linger in on certain things. Like,
Right.
the bodyguard gets his hand chopped off, and then they show the hand hit the ground, and then the hand starts actually, like, as rigor
Twitching, yeah.
mortis. Yeah,
But
it's
no,
like
relaxing. Yeah, relaxing.
yeah, relaxes on the
Mhm.
gun that it had in its hand. And then you mentioned Batman, but you have the wife, like, her throat being bit into, and you have the pearls flying with all this blood, and
Pearls.
it
Yeah.
lingers on that stuff even when they go into the morgue, like the way they, like, just, here's a dead body with its penis hanging out, here's
Yeah.
this, there's that. Like, this has just got a much more, ghoulish, like,
Yes.
and the violence isn't like the violence in Alligator is funny. It's sort of, like, I think I used the word impish when we were talking about it. This movie is deadly serious. Like, this imagery that it's showing, it may be like poetic in a weird way, but it's very gruesome too.
Yeah.
And it's meant to be both awe-inspiring but also, like, extremely shocking. Like, they, and I think even though technically, like, there's some stuff in Alligator that I think is more gory than this, I feel like the violence in this feels more visceral
Oh,
to me.
absolutely. I remember being stunned and fascinated by this as a kid. I want to take a moment before we lose it because I was thinking about this. You mentioned the pearls. So the wife of Mr. Vanderveer, the new wife of Mr. Vanderveer, gets attacked by an off-screen creature, and the pearls pop. Her pearl necklace pops, and the pearls go everywhere. And this is 1981, and I have always believed that Frank Miller's main source for the focusing on the bouncing pearls was the bouncing ball in Lone Wolf and Cub, because Frank Miller was famously a big fan of that series and had written about it. And it features a bouncing ball similar to the bouncing pearls, but I believe he gets the image of the pearls themselves from this movie. I really believe that. I think that there's a very good chance that Frank Miller was just visually inspired by this.
Can I
And
say also, just a bit before we get off the
yeah,
topic of the visual, the production design is gorgeous. The fact that they invent all this art that's made by the aunt or the mom or whoever she is, the of the of the rich guy. There's all they have. First of all, they have this really bizarre windmill installation that's
Yeah.
created by his ancestor, that's with these like sails, which is where all the killing. So a lot of that is not, it's, you're talking about the gore, and it's kind of contrasted or interplayed with this beautiful art. You've got the really cool sails and the neat windmill thing, and then you have the beautiful mirrored wind chimes that they keep showing both in the home and at the park, and everywhere. And then there's all this other art. Well, some of the art's not that beautiful, but I love the wind chimes. I think they were really cool. So
oh
I
yeah,
just thought that was neat. All the use of the mirrors was really cool. A lot of neat visual stuff. Of course,
that's a really good
the
point.
architecture they create an entire design of these buildings that they're about to put up.
Yeah,
And that's all created for this, obviously.
a
So
hell of a
that
lot of
was
work.
pretty neat.
Yeah, I was thinking about how, I mean, this movie takes its darn time. It's 2 hours long, and that there's like there's time spent with Albert Finney just looking at his reflection in these long mirrors. It's all great. It all Every frame of this movie looks amazing, and yet it is possible that it's a little overindulgent in all of that. I mean, because eventually you've got to. I would love to see the version Tony saw because I'm curious. Like, what 30 minutes did they remove? Like, did they
Yeah, I
remove
don't.
the naked running on the beach? By
Oh, I mean,
It
it's
doesn't
been
seem like
so
they could have
long
had
ago.
very much of that
Yeah, yeah.
scene.
I mean that if I were to excise stuff, that'd probably be part of it because it doesn't go as far. Like it leads to things, but you could cut that down because
Yeah,
it's
you could just have a
mainly
little bit.
as long as you keep his interaction with Almost, you're pretty good. Like some of the
yeah,
bits,
we should
I
talk about
definitely don't
that.
remember. It's been a long time, but I also think that some of the windmill spinning, the kind of bucket of blood thrown across
Yeah,
things, and how that all interacts. Like, I've seen now as I was watching it, I can't put my finger on it immediately, but that motif of death, a spinning kind of merry-go-round thing, and all of that together, I think that's actually been influential on a bunch of other movies where you see that motif kind of played with.
yeah,
And so, speaking of which, and then we could probably move on, but also like seeing it this time and going, wow, not just the vision of computers and then the vision like influencing Predator, but that kind of like whoa, like
yeah.
sound effect that where we switch. Like I didn't realize, I had totally forgotten how much that became what that vision sounds like. But it's not
Yes,
just that. If you're really listening, there's a bed, kind of an electronic slash heightened
yes,
sound effect bed to all of it that is also kind of paid homage or just kind of like played with. Like it became the language of that vision in Predator as well.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
thought that
When a
was
character is
fascinating because it's not
talking,
just the cuts;
they're
it's
flangy.
how it
There's a
sounds.
sound of what when somebody's talking, the animal hears them different from the way humans do.
Yeah,
It's a
but
neat
it
it's a neat effect.
but it's
Yeah.
deeper than that. It's the ambiance, it's the room noise
Mm.
of that vision that's carried over as well. And I definitely had forgotten about that. And seeing it this time was just crystal clear. Like, whoa, this set the precedent for what we would eventually think of as strange vision. But then also, I think when I see all the techno stuff, I think of things like Looker and a few others,
Which was
and
also Albert Finney. Yeah.
some Skinemax computer stuff. I forgot what the name of it is. There's the one I think I turned you on to, where it's like the future model
Oh
killer
yeah.
movie. But like how we view what computers are and how prescient. We could talk about it more later, but how prescient the computer surveillance state stuff is, which I had forgotten, absolutely forgotten. And it's they're doing facial recognition and doing like, hey, we can if we view your body acts this way, like for 81 in a
Yeah.
spiritual wolf movie, that's just unbelievable. Like I don't know, it doesn't even seem like it belongs in a way, but it's fascinating that it's part of this. Like they're doing so much in this movie that I had completely forgotten. I think that's cool.
That's a really good point when you think about just how much they've put into this movie that wasn't even in the novel. It's just like whoever is writing this film, and I don't recall who the screenwriter is, but they just keep adding. It's like, let's add some some spy stuff. Let's add some
Yeah, I mean, you could just as
yeah.
easily have turned this into cut all the wolf, like you get all opposite way, cut all the wolf stuff and turn this into a techno thriller about
Yeah.
somebody wanting to bomb something in New York City.
Yes.
It could have just as easily been that movie
Or a
with
standard
like
serial killer movie like The
sure,
January Man or something like that.
right. But
You
this one
know.
has actual terrorists or a group that's getting framed
Yes.
up as terrorists. Like there are terrorists, but they're definitely pushing that narrative.
Yeah.
And jumping those conclusions. So it's pretty fascinating. Just again, the amount of stuff in here is
I wanted to
wow.
mention, you mentioned the sound design, and there's several other bits of the sound design that I thought were fascinating. One is the technology, because the in this film, which takes place like a year and a half after it comes out, like the film takes place in like 1983. I don't know why they say it's the near future. I guess it's to explain some of the computer stuff they have. But in this movie, the police department has partnered up with this security firm that is interested in solving the murder of this rich guy who got killed. So they've got all the computers. But it does this thing that in the 80s movies with computers did, where anytime a lot of stuff appears on a screen, a monitor makes a sound like a dot matrix computer. It'll just suddenly go, or a dot matrix printer will just go brrr, so that if a bunch of stuff shows on a screen, it rattles off, which I think is
Right, yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah, that's the sound of text being put to the screen for some reason. I guess I mean, look, we still like, if you've ever been around somebody who leaves all of the typing sounds on their phone, you're like, why would you do that?
Seriously,
Like
why?
it's a phone. You don't have
Uh,
like there's not a keyboard to it, and yet you person on public transportation or next to me have it
Right?
at full volume, and I get to hear every single click 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 click,
that
click.
drives me bonkers.
Like so what we decided in the 80s, let's set the precedent. Also with the definitely computer font, which is
Yes.
which is not what we get in DOS at all. If you've
Yeah.
ever like seen, like it's this high-tech font that we've decided it ends up on buildings, on it ends up less on computers as we get computers, but it ends up as the font of technology
Yeah.
for
Well
like a
said.
good
Yes.
space of time. Like on signs, on you'll see
Sure.
it like
So if you
if
open
it
a place at the
delineates.
mall that fixes computers, you're going to use that font on
Yes,
your sign, for
and
sure.
it's a weird choice too, because it's not that efficient. It's like big and bubbly in places, but we decided that was the font. It's probably, I'm sure there are people font experts who go, oh yeah, well that was because this it's created to do this and it looked like that, and maybe you could catch it. I would have to do the research, but I'm sure there's somebody who could explain that. But it was the font of the future, and it's
Yeah.
huge on all of those monitors too.
The
It,
only reason why I was glad that appeared is because it replaced the font of Star Wars. Like there was a period
sure,
when that weird balloony S connected to another letter was just everywhere, and then it got replaced by that. But we're running far afield. We should get back to, there's an investigation going on,
sure,
and one of the early, so there's really two big suspects that Albert Finney has at first. Albert Finney, he of the craggy face, like craggier than Jor-El, hammered shit. Albert Finney has two big suspects. One is a very active eco-terrorist group, and the other is this dude who is also connected to eco-terrorism, who is a part of what's called the quote unquote Native American movement, and their most active member, who's been already sent up once, is Edward James Olmos as Eddie Holt. And Edward James Olmos is a discovery. I don't know how early this is in his career, but he
This is
is.
pretty much for all of these guys. It's like one of the very first projects that they all do. They're all
That's
super
amazing.
young.
Edward James Olmos amazing in here. I mean, he's being filmed talking to Albert Finney. This is either a special effect or just really amazing. You know, maybe they're really on top of the Manhattan Bridge. I have no idea. But you know, as a character, he is up there on top of this bridge where he works. In the world of this movie, all of the work of building bridges is handled by Native Americans. Like that, they've got a lock on that work. I don't know if this is just a fantasy of this film. If you're a listener and you're not too offended by the question, if you could tell me if there's any basis for that, I would love to know. But he goes up to interview this con named Eddie Holt up on top of this bridge, and Eddie Holt is like, "Oh yeah, he makes fun of him as the stupid detective. He's like, "Yeah, we're all magical. I can turn into animals, and I can, and you
You
know,
know,
Well, and he suggests that he jump off the bridge. He's like,
yeah,
just believe that you're a bird, and then jump.
yeah,
as much as some of the Native American stuff is typical late 70s, 80s, like, oh, that's an unfortunate take on that. The him ribbing
yeah,
Howard Finney's character and going, yeah, man, we're totally all of us Indians do this, like,
Shapeshifters.
you know, Indians at the time, right? Not. I
yeah,
mean, they didn't. Everybody in here is referred to as Indian, for better or worse. It's 80s, 81. But
yes.
yeah, when he says like, yeah, we're all magic, and that's how it works. And
He's great.
just,
He's
just
really good.
ribbing like any, but he gets even more dangerous because of their interaction. He actually like lets his takes his cable off.
Yeah.
You know, he
Well,
there's an air of danger to that also, where he's like, hey, you know, I know
And
my
he's
way
like,
around
this
here.
is
You
going to be
don't.
murder, you know.
Right.
this is they're also trying to put forth the idea at this point in the movie that this guy might be a for real werewolf. Like
Of course,
this guy is a red herring, and even the mention of like shape shifting is trying to like trigger certain thoughts in a moviegoer's brain. And you know,
Absolutely.
Yes.
for better or for worse, like, you know, some people walk away from this movie feeling frustrated and pissed off because of this stuff. Like I as an adult, I think it's clever, kind of like Tony. When I was a kid, I found myself annoyed by that. But you know, that's what's great about giving stuff chances again at different points in your life, is your experience with it might be different.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so funny that I know I saw this movie a number of times, and it's very possible that I must have seen it the whole way through. Maybe I just paid no attention. Like, I have no memory of the boring parts, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, but I clearly was willing to stick around because I remember seeing the police captain get beheaded at the end. So it's,
And his
but,
head talks, which is
right.
I think
I'm
it's so
sorry. I
great.
shouldn't laugh. Poor man. I feel
Well,
very sorry
I
for him.
mean,
But
it's one of those like, whoa, you were not expecting that.
I
right.
was, because I was hoping it was going to pay off from the beginning. Every time they like
That's
beheaded
true.
somebody, every time they beheaded, because it was like a couple more people get beheaded before that point, and I was like, "Oh, come on, you're not gonna blink or talk or anything." And this was like, I'm like, yes.
I have to say, speaking of that, so we should talk also about our other major star. I know that we need to get to the love interest as well, but Gregory Hines, the dancer, is here acting, and he plays this coroner who becomes sort of one of Albert Finney's friends, and they may even know one another before this. I actually
Yeah, I
can't
mean,
remember.
they seem to, because has to visit. I mean, he purposely comes down at the beginning,
Yeah.
to talk to him, and you know, in the morgue. So yeah, I mean, we get the impression that they've seen a lot of bodies together and or investigated a lot of bodies together. Is the impression
Yeah.
I got.
And they're so great. It's fun
Yeah,
listening
they
to
are
them.
really good. That chemistry works out really well.
Yeah. I feel bad that this character dies because, like,
Yeah.
I want this character to be around This is one of the things I often complain
Well,
about about horror movies is that you get rid of characters like this, and that's sad.
What also, you talk about stuff that it seems like it jumps around. Like he gets killed by the wolves, and you have all this stuff where Finney's character seems like he's in shock from it, but he never says, yeah, this guy just got killed. He instead fumbles into a bar and gets served a bunch of exposition.
Yes.
So like that feels like there needs to be like a scene in between where he's reporting his
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm
See,
saying. Right. That's what I'm saying when I say that like entire plot points are eliminated in the 2.5 hours.
I actually like that he's just shell shocked. It's like he's in shock, and just like the bar is the closest thing. It happens to be this bar where I assume it's the same one we see him staking out earlier. And
He
I kind of
definitely
like
wants
the
to go
fact that
talk to Eddie Holt because he
yeah,
thinks Eddie Holt will have answers. And at
and
this point, Eddie gives him some answers too.
I kind of like that there wasn't like he's just like, what, oh my, I'm so out of my depth.
Right.
And he wanders in the bar and everybody's looking at him like, hey, the white guy's here. He does not look well at all. And they're playing, they're also playing like it's New York, but in this bar is like the kind of the dive bar, the country bar. So they're playing like some slow
Yes.
melody country, and he's just, anybody here know about wolves? Kind of like everybody's like, whoa, this guy has not had a good time.
He's still got
and
blood spattered on
yeah,
his face
exactly.
when he walks in. Yeah.
I kind of like that. That's the reaction. I thought it worked well for me. I understand where you're coming from, but I think that I don't even know what to do anymore about this. Like we had guns, we had we had parabolic mics, like we were teched up and gunned up.
Right.
And,
Well, and I think what's happening is that he's slowly learning the lesson that
right.
that they won't that you can't
Yeah.
you can't outgun them. You have to like just
Yeah.
be pacifist if you want them to not kill you.
Well, okay, so let's talk for a moment about what it is that the killer. So at this point, Eddie, Edward James Olmos as Drew mentions, gives him the exposition and says, "Here's the deal." And so I would like to talk about what the deal is. He goes, "These
They're
are
protecting their ground where they hunt, their hunting
right.
grounds, and they're
They
protecting
they
their lives.
hunt they hunt people. So this is morally complicated, by the way. These wolves have always had a sort of unwritten deal with mankind in a sense where they hunt the people that mankind leaves alone, the abandoned, the homeless, the dregs of society. And
Super weird.
and so which means, by the way, that if you're going to quote unquote clean up the town, you're going to have less of you're going to disrupt the hunting ground of these special wolves. So the special wolves are saying, hey, we want to keep our hunting ground, which is complicated morally also, because it means we need to keep the homeless, because what's they're hunting people. They're saying we need you to continue to tribute us a certain number of people that you don't mind us eating. That's fascinating and weird. I mean, that's really strange. And because it takes for granted that in human society there will always be disposable people. That's a shocking
Yeah,
thing to posit.
for sure.
And
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 they
that's by the
and the
yeah.
wolves discard like the diseased parts of the people, which is really interesting.
Right. That they've gotten really good at this. Down through the centuries, this is what they do. They eat the people that are abandoned by humans. It's fascinating. I mean, but why don't they eat cows? Like what? Like why do they eat
Where are you
Well,
gonna
they're
get cows
yeah,
in
I was gonna say they're in Manhattan.
like in New York? Like,
Because
I mean, I have a few reasons why New York City is not the cow pasture
yes,
farmland of that you might expect the wolves to enjoy.
it's just
But
really weird. I just think it's funny that the wolves are mad about gentrification, not because it displaces people from homes they can afford, but because it
Because they won't
displaces
care about that.
it displaces their ability to kill people that that the
Indiscriminately.
gentry don't care about. That is weird.
That is weird.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, it is sort of a very 80s narrative though when you think about it.
yeah,
Mm.
Well, I mean, screw the homeless, screw the poor, you're meat.
right.
Like
Yeah, I
that may
mean,
not be that may not be how they intended it to be viewed, but
no, I get it. Like a deeply cynical way of looking
yeah,
that. Yeah, that everybody's
the
meat to somebody. Yeah, I can see that.
what's interesting to me about the morality going on in this movie is the wolves kind of win.
hmm
Like unlike every other creature in all the movies we've watched leading up to this,
Yes.
the wolves are just going to keep it, like the way Albert Finney basically has to lay down his gun and say no, I accept what's going on. I give up my
You can keep
investigation.
eating homeless
Oh,
people. It's
Yeah.
fine.
And the wolves are yeah, so in a way, yeah, I guess you're right. Like this is the more cynical killer be killed take on things.
well, look, I mean, there's several things like what you're talking about. Like this is Reagan era, and as much as we look at nostalgia for music, perhaps, or for new wave looks, or any number of neon Nagel painting kind of stuff, like there was definitely there's a lot of the stuff you see here, and a lot of what art eventually, why we get Judge Dredd out of Reagan Thatcher era and comics and like the cynicism that we were kind of going through or kind of ran through and came out of is there. But here's the thing: not only do the wolves win, but because of the narrative, which I still think it's fascinating. Whether or not we need to go back into it or not is questionable. Like as they try to track down this terrorist group, Gotterdammerung, they're doing all this police surveillance or security surveillance, not directly police, but they have this team of experts who are filming people without them knowing it, analyzing them through computers, basically facial recognition stuff. But not only do the wolves win, but because it's such a fanciful tale that no one will believe,
Yeah.
they go, no, it's totally the terrorists. Like, are you sure? I mean, there were wolves, like there's like wolf hair around, nope, terrorists.
That's really funny and
Absolutely,
totally
it's the
true.
terrorists. Because who would believe that wolves could go up a like bust in the windows from outside on a high rise? Like that's like he decides to go. Everybody around agrees. Nope, there is zero supernatural anything.
Yeah.
All the stuff I talked with Eddie and his friends that it's got to be the terrorists totally, and you kind of wonder who's getting rounded up
That's a really good point. I
for
hadn't
all
thought
these
about that.
murders. Like they I can guarantee you, knowing how things work as an adult, there's a bunch of people on those tapes who are getting rounded up and incarcerated, maybe forever. Who knows?
Yeah.
Because here's the thing: this all happens in rich people land.
Yes.
So in rich people land, a cop gets beheaded, his car blows up, windows are broken, and once you inconvenience rich people,
Yeah.
I guarantee you a chunk of people with poor lawyers, poor representation are getting rounded up, told that they're goddamn wrong where they are or not. And those people are in jail or worse.
Yeah, I agree.
After this
with
movie.
You. Well, I mean, think about like movies like Dirty Harry from this period, and you think about how Harry will basically go around. He's trying to find a serial killer, and he'll go around and abuse everybody in sight. Who, all these poor people living in the city. When Harry comes around, he's like, "I'm looking for this guy." He'll beat him. He'll punch him. He'll choke them. He'll slap them around. He'll threaten them, and we watching it are expected to go, yeah, I guess I'm lucky that I don't have to do Dirty Harry's job, But there's never a thought that, like, Harry shouldn't be so awful to those people. There's just this cynical notion that, well, this is just the way the world is.
Now,
people like Harry go.
Yeah. Now, granted, there's some threats, but again, as an adult viewing this, right? Like,
yeah,
watching the world that we've lived through over the past few decades, you go, well, saying I want to do something, like there's a how do you determine at the point where you go, hey, we should investigate that or not, right?
Yeah.
It's very complicated, especially when considering you're determining this through 80s computers that are supposed to tell you these things, which I guarantee you are probably even worse than lie detectors at this point.
Yeah.
But we live in the world of technology in '83, which is, in 2 short years, who knows where technology will be, right?
That's a wonderful
From
thought. I mean,
81 to
I
83. No,
yeah.
I say that facetiously, but it's like, the future world of '83. Like, this is how we're gonna do it. But it is prescient because we do, like, there's facial recognition stuff that's being run all the time on people that is scary.
Well,
But
there's two aspects of pseudoscience. Like the facial recognition is valid, I suppose. But I was just listening to Joy and I were listening to our daughter who's did her project this semester on people's bullshit beliefs about lie detection, like that.
oh,
That's not how she put
absolutely.
it, but
That's
yeah.
Right,
that's
but
yeah.
but
Well, I've read more than enough on, like, ooh,
yeah, and people
how
really
easy it's colored. Like,
really believe a lot of this stuff, including experts will convince themselves, "Oh yeah, I know how to tell when somebody's lying or when somebody's telling the truth," and in fact, your odds, if you're an expert who's been trained, your odds are just basically equivalent to random, whether you can
right,
tell what. And so that means that sort of tosses on its head almost anything about like whether this person that you brought in for a in this movie, they're showing technology that says, "Oh, that woman just claimed to know about a murder, but she actually knows nothing because we can tell
right.
from this infrared." But in fact, that's nonsense. Like we're still
I
in
mean,
the dark.
there's a little bit of, I mean, we extrapolate that into, the blush response stuff from into Blade Runner, right? But
Yes,
it's
right,
all the
all the way
similar
into Blade Runner.
technology. But
Yeah,
now we've already, in this movie, we've already got the kernel of Blade Runner technology in '83, in its '83, which is
yeah.
actually '81. But the future
Isn't
of
that
'83
interesting?
contains this.
If you had
But
asked me when I watched this, "Hey, does this movie take place in the future?" I never would have thought about the fact that this movie, it's just weird. It's weird that it takes place in slightly in the future.
Well, I
Um,
like that. I mean, as far as how things have gone since this and kind of what, like, these private security firms are doing and all of that, like, that's somebody had their pulse on some stuff that was
yeah,
going on.
yeah,
And that's what's surprising is in amongst this cops, Native American spirit wolf supernatural movie is this other stuff, which
right.
is like, all of that is fascinating to
It's
me.
the same
But
concern that dominated RoboCop, this notion that the cops are
right,
gonna be taken over by private concerns. The funny thing is that's not what actually ended up happening. Instead, the private concerns took over prisons
mm,
and, bases. So it got
yeah, but
weirder.
there's still enough of that.
No, it got so much weirder than what people were predicting, you
Oh
know?
yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's the universal. Like, there's stuff
Yeah.
there's stuff that we would term Orwellian that has gone far beyond what Orwell
Oh,
could have. Like,
absolutely.
what? Wait, you signed up for the surveillance? Like, you pay for the hate group? Like, it just
Yeah.
all the stuff where you go, whoa, so many sci-fi writers and speculative fiction writers just shrug and go, or it'd be akin to the end of Planet of the Apes. You blew it all up.
Yes.
Like, how did you? Why would you do this?
Okay,
Right?
but I wanna spin
Yeah.
back to speaking of blowing it all up. So, what we've learned, by
Are
the
you gonna
way,
talk about the car full of explodium that blows up?
well, before that, the destructive the concept is that they are knocking down these old parts of town that they've displaced all these people, um, and they're going to build these new towers and then they get rid of the hunting ground for these wolves. But I just wanted to mention this is actually these burned out areas of the South Bronx that they're shooting in, and one central piece of this set is in fact fake, and it's amazing. They built a church set and burned it to create the set that you see with the iron steps
Yeah,
and
it's super cool
That's
looking.
that's a
it
really good, like, the production designers, like, everybody involved in creating that did a
yeah.
great job because it fits with the area. Like, at no point did I feel like, oh, look, they just erected this burned out church. Like, I mean, probably maybe if you were there, like, if you knew the area, you probably recognize, right?
Right,
But as a viewer, it feels very cohesive.
it looks
I
wonderful.
love the stained glass imagery of the wolves in this.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like I honestly like There was one in particular of like a wolf with like a person in his mouth, and I'm like, I want a tattoo of that stat. Like that is
Yeah.
so cool looking. It's like I whoever did the design on that stuff, my hat's off to them.
Yeah, it's
For real.
wonderful.
I also like that scene leads to the first time where our protagonists realize they are way out of their league. And
Yes.
just go, we need to get the hell out. Like, get the hell out right now. It's time to go. Like, whatever's here, we can investigate later. But we're
Yeah.
gonna run and just keep running. Like,
But that's the moment when he decides. They don't, and the script, considering this is a long movie, the script doesn't bother to give us an explanation. But he decides, wait a minute, that sound of a baby coming from the top of this burned out church is bullshit, and we and he runs like crazy. That is great. I mean, he grabs his partner, he grabs Rebecca Neff, the detective, but they just book it out of there. That is
oh,
something from the novel, by the way. In the novel, they have this extraordinary ability to imitate babies crying. It's a way that they lure
yeah,
people.
that leads me to wonder what else is on the 4-hour cut.
Yeah.
By the way, there's also through all of this special effects and wizardry, we also get where the wolves watch them have sex through like the wolf vision.
Yes.
With weird sound. And I the thing I kept
That
thinking
was
was,
weird.
there's some freaky predator who's done that. More like, or like, what do you, and they're like, Dave, dude, if you hunt them, is shut up, man. Like, don't shame me. And like the other predator's like, man, I really hate going on hunts with that guy. Peeking in windows, watching things like, oh, it's Earth. Like, just hunt them, man. What's wrong with you? Like that's because why are the wolves like
Don't
watching
kink
them?
shame me, man.
Yeah, you're like, what? I'm just getting to know. I'm just studying my prey. Yeah, but this is like the third night in a row you've been studying, air quotes, like your prey. Stop it. But it's a weird, like it's such a strange that was a strange choice to kind of like it's this kind of bonding
It's a
moment
really
where
good
he's been
point.
through a lot.
Yeah.
They've been through a lot, and then but the fact that when you see that, it's like the wolves like, huh, should we interrupt? Should we eat? Should we cut off their heads while they're doing? No, we're just gonna watch a little bit.
You're right. It makes no sense at all.
Well,
It's not even.
I mean, the reason is because it takes that scene and changes it, right?
I'm
It's
not.
not
I have
just a
to say, I'm
cinematic
not even
like
sure we
sex
need.
scene.
I'm not even sure we need the love scene in this movie. I
Sure.
mean, I it's not like these two have like really connected. I don't know.
No, I don't know. I don't. Again, it's not me to judge like that, but like it does what the Wolfen vision does is change that.
Yeah, that's
Which
true.
is
It does
interesting.
give you an unusual. Consider if this is an obligatory scene that you have to have in any movie of this era.
Right.
That's about a couple of cops of the opposite sex who are presumed to be heterosexual, then I guess this is a new way of seeing it.
Right.
I suppose I don't need to
But
see
like I said,
Albert Finney's bare ass even through infrared. I just it's not.
But all
What
I can
about
think
the
about is
people
like
that
no
did
predator.
want to see Albert Finney's bare ass?
I
Jason?
guess they're
It's for them.
frustrated by the fact that they have to see it through infrared.
Right.
Finney has a lot of luxurious hair, by the way, in this movie. I mean,
It's
if
very,
you
It's so
it's
funny
very
because
curly.
I kind of came to know him early on as Daddy Warbucks, so I thought he was like didn't have
Oh
hair.
yeah! Wow! Yeah.
same era.
Negaverse that he.
Yeah, this is the era when Albert Finney was showing up in a lot of mainstream movies as the lead, and then that era kind of came to an end. But yes, here he was. You mentioned Looker, which had Susan Day. I haven't seen that movie since the 80s.
Oh, I saw it. I need to get that on Blu-ray. It's definitely of its time, but yet again, some of the stuff in Looker, for all of its kind of who's killing the fashion models of the world,
Yeah.
kind of play like the Skinamaxy kind of aspects of that movie. There is also a bunch of strangely prescient stuff. Like the people who had somehow tapped into where the future is going, and you get those blips of that. That is fascinating to me. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if your mileage may vary on Looker, but I saw it not too long ago and said, you know what, I think I need to get this on Blu-ray. I don't think Rain was as enamored with it, but
I mean,
It's
I've
interesting.
said
It's an
I want
interesting film.
movies. I mean, I want movies to be more time stamped. I want movies to really be like to me that makes them better if it reflects like something about the era, something about a recession of the time that makes it to me better, not worse. You know, I want to see the computers. I want to see the clothes. I want everything to remind me of when the movie was made. Um,
Well, this
yeah,
this movie definitely looks like the early '80s. I
boy, does
mean,
it, man.
right down to a woman in a fur coat doing cocaine.
Right.
Oh,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Oh, all of that.
And that
And
asshole's, you know, maybe he's a very nice billionaire industrialist, but
no, at no point did I ever think like any of the people who get murdered at the beginning don't probably deserve it. Like you don't look, I prefer people not to die, especially decapitated by wolves. But if ever the way they portray them and how that all plays out, also with they note that the bodyguard is maybe into some kind of occult stuff is
yes,
Voodoo,
bizarre
yeah,
that there's also
voodoo,
a
yeah.
Completely
occult thing.
dropped though.
right.
Yeah, of course, but
It
then
was probably it was part of the 4.5 hours.
Yeah.
exactly. There that's also this like, there's well they do a nice kind of liberal smattering of red herrings throughout, right? Or what or give well they give our detective the reason he comes in is they're like, oh, you're back, and the reason is because it's a complicated case, and for better or worse they know that he's there. I tell you
You
one thing I
you
really loved was Gregory Hines telling him he's a master of karate and like kicking and stuff. And then and then their boss comes and is like, I don't even want to know.
you
Like
you
I've
kind
had
of
that discussion actually at a game company where like we're having some discussion or whatever, and my producer would come in and she just goes, never mind, just keep talking. Get your work done. And I just thought that scene was just amazing because he's like, it's such a great character moment too. Like,
Yes.
hey, I work in the morning, but I'm lethal and I can do this. And that partnership, that buddy,
Oh, it's wonderful.
that buddy part is great. And I just love that reaction. Like, why is your friend
I
sticking in your
I
office?
kind of get the sense that like Albert Finney's character has like other, because there's this sense that he's troubled, but we never fully learn why. They just say family
Right.
troubles and he drank
Yeah,
too
that's
much.
right.
But I get the sense that like this is a guy that they pull in for weird cases. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of cool that if you think about it, like there's this probably all these adventures that this guy has been on leading up to this.
Yeah.
um a bit like, not that they're remotely the same in tone, but it's a bit like Goonies in that, like, there's this implied aspect that like the Goonies are constantly going on like Hardy Boys style
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
adventures prior to the lead up of the movie. This guy could have been solving other weird homicides, throughout
I
New York history with Gregory Hines, and I would watch that movie series.
Yeah, I also think that he is his own. He does a little bit better in this one, I think, despite the tragedy that's happened. But you definitely get everybody looks at him and goes, "That guy is his own worst enemy."
Hmm.
Like he has dug his own hole. There's a reason why he's kind of alone as a detective. Only has his best friend working the morgue. Like I love that kind of lived in cop aspect to him
Yes.
of he is another one of those kind of damaged. Yeah, I mean, but do you really want to be on a case with that guy?
Right.
I've heard about that guy. You kind of get the impression the rumor mill is probably bigger than what actually happened, but it's a sad tale regardless.
Yeah, that's a
And
good
he's
point.
perfect to play this. I just this cast just absolutely rips.
I think it's funny that we don't see these characters anymore. That I feel like and it's this is not a complaint because we're kind of past it, but there was a shorthand of this era that lasted well into the end of the '80s and into the '90s, where a police detective, the shorthand, he drives around a beat up old car. He's got hamburger wrappers in the floorboards, and he doesn't take his health seriously, and he's cynical about everything. I think after a while the thing is we've just seen it too much, and it becomes it becomes a cliche. I think it might already be a cliche here, but it's
Well,
Albert Finney is so good in this part.
there was even, it just reminded me, I'm drawing a blank on the name I need to remember it. There was there was a pilot. For a while I was into watching a lot of pilots of and there was a future show, and I can't remember. Seems like it was somebody like Ray Weiss or somebody. I don't know. I don't think it was him, but
Uh-huh.
he basically plays that character, but it's in the future, like a slightly Buck Rogers-y future, but not exactly.
There's Split Second where you've got Rutger Hauer.
No. This was a pilot. This is like a TV pilot. But it was that same kind of, but it was like the cheesier shorthand version, but it was still in that, firmly in that, like,
boy, that sounds
yeah,
great.
he's loose.
I hope
and
if it really was, and you could be misremembering, but if it really was Ray Wise, that would be awesome.
I can't remember. It seemed like, but I just remember watching this and going, "Oh, look, it's that cop, but now it's in the future." And it contained all of the, like, I think his partner was a cyborg woman, if I remember correctly. So there's all that, like, hey, look,
interesting.
hot cyborg woman. Oh no, I think it's just
Butler played a cyborg cop in it was called Man. Oh man, that's a tough one. Well, anyway, that's we could go down a long rabbit hole of this stuff, but let me bring us back towards this film. I really do want to spend some more time thinking about those kind of detective characters, but we'll come up with a list. Okay, so as we mentioned, because we kind of danced around it, this film resolves because once Albert Finney spends some time thinking about what it is that the wolves are trying to accomplish, he basically manages to create a peace with the wolves, as Drew says, by letting the wolves win and saying, now that Vanderveer, the rich guy, is dead, hopefully, I'm sort of filling in some blanks, he crushes the model, which sends a signal to the wolves, well, we're not going to build this office park, and the wolves are satisfied with that.
Because this cop gets to decide this.
Right. I'm going to just go with the notion that is how he communicates it to the wolves. It actually is going to be accomplished because they already killed the guy who was going to build it. And
yeah, exactly.
And the wolves, and then as Tony pointed out, once the wolves disappear, and they do, by the way, rather problematically disappear. They just fade.
Yeah, that was weird.
That was weird, and I'm just going to presume that was like a Batman disappearance. They just sort of managed to I don't know. They have the power to cloud men's minds. They snuck away, but it doesn't matter because
literally faded out of existence.
Yeah, when everybody comes up, they go, "Hey, what happened, Albert Finney?" And he goes, "Terrorists," and so that's the end of the movie.
Terrorists, and like I said, they're gonna get a bunch of people are gonna get rounded up. Like, there's no way.
Oh, that's sad.
That's gonna
So
but meanwhile,
all right, so
he says, "Hey, by the way, still wolves are running around killing people."
Yes.
No, I don't think so. I think they faded out of existence.
No. They're gonna keep doing it.
There's a stinger. There's a stinger in Wolfen Vision, though.
Oh, there is.
They're still doing it
afterwards.
They're not just doing this in New York City. Like they're investigating. They're doing it all over America.
Yeah.
Yep. Which is different. Whitley Strieber, in his novel, what happens is they figure out that there's a race of smart wolves around, and so now the humans know that there are smart wolves, and they're basically going to go to war with them, and the wolves kind of declare, bring it on, chumps, and that's the end of that book, setting up a future of basically a big human wolf war. But in this movie, it's more like a human wolf peace where the humans are going to pretend that they never learned anything, and the wolves are going to keep eating people, and that's
in both versions, I'm rooting for the wolves. To be clear.
Oh man! So before we get to our final thoughts, is there anything that we missed, like any striking images that might be worth calling out?
The score is cool.
Oh, James Horner did the score.
Yeah.
It sounds a lot like Wrath of Khan.
Does
and Alien
and Aliens.
Neither one of those things turned me off.
No, man, it's great. I just want to mention that that the French horns in the score, I don't care if it does sound like Aliens and Wrath of Khan. I can listen to it all day because it's so neat to hear that. And the only difference is you have less wood blocks and stuff that you have all this sort of Klingon noise in Wrath of Khan, and in this you've just got those French horns, and it's great. It's really, really cool.
Klingon Noise is a great band name. By the
Yes.
Its rival Vulcan Sound.
Yes, Vulcan sounds like honestly the nerdiest college band
Exactly.
that you ever saw. Oh my God, that sounds yeah.
Oh, by the way, I remembered that Ray Wise. It was Ray Wise, and it was
Okay.
an '85 pilot called Condor,
Oh my.
where
Wow.
he hates cyborgs, and yet his beautiful blonde partner is a cyborg. And how will he, a hard-boiled future cop, deal with the fact that his attractive blonde partner is a cyborg? Condor, '85. I was right, but again, part of the thing is, he's a little less hard boiled in that same way. Like he drives a nicer future car, etc. But it's still the shorthand, like the fact that shorthand is still kind of going on in quote unquote in the future in '85 is kind of what we were talking about.
Yes.
I have to watch the whole thing to see if that actually tracks. Like he's not Albert Finney's character here, but he is like it's in that realm that you were talking about.
Well, yeah. It basically, the thing is, this becomes a mimeograph of a mimeograph of a mimeograph to the point where you don't even remember exactly why are all these elements here. Like
why are you using mimeograph? Is it because we're in the 80s?
I guess. I don't know. I don't know why I said that.
Because that's literally like
that's great. Yeah,
80s reference.
That's what I said.
Funny.
I have no idea why I said that.
Because there's a smell sensation also with mimeograph. Like it's an ingrained memory.
Anybody under the age of 30 is going, what
the hell is a mimeograph?
And why would you even like? Yeah, I'm kind of with Julia. I get it, but like, who else?
So funny.
The funny thing is that was not carefully chosen.
Of a Xerox machine, a copy machine.
I didn't think super hard on that one. It just was literally
smelly purple copies.
Yeah,
yeah.
But if you my point is, these tropes of what this detective is like, by the time you reach a point eventually when you're like, I don't even know, like, why do these characters always hate exercise? Why are they so cynical about health food? Why are they so like?
Because real men eat donuts, Jason.
Right. Well, that's what's funny, but
yeah.
There's not even a it's so this is going to sound so 2024. It's such toxic masculinity, but there's not even a reason like
you can't redeem yourself from mimeograph just because you say toxic masculinity. Sorry, it's too late.
You bet I can.
We're not. This character exists a few years away from like the sort of muscle-bound, health-conscious heroes we would get with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think, like that sort of supercut action hero hasn't fully submitted yet, so also though he is more believable as a cop, like he's he's a little doughy, I guess, but
believe me, I watch a lot of true crime, and that pretty much describes a lot of detectives. I mean, honestly.
Well, but I wouldn't want to fight Albert Finney in this movie. Like I bet he fights dirty, first of all. And like he seems like he's been through some shit. So like, there's a reality to that I like.
Oh, absolutely. No, I love this. I just want to. I would really like to see an entire like white paper or book or something about this sort of character and why he existed, like how he grew out of the film noir detectives and why it went away. And I'm just fascinated by that. But anyway, let's get our final thoughts.
I think somebody like our friend Kayla, although she's more like, I don't know if she would be the one, because she could certainly do it. But or if there's a guy who's into hard boiled stuff, and
Yeah.
where does this lead? How does this lead perhaps into even something like Cobra, or
Right.
something like how does that, because there's kind of a through line there. I would definitely also read that book.
Yeah, that would be really cool, and it may exist. So we'll find out. But let's get our final thoughts, and then we'll get around to our endorsements. All right. So it was Tony, Julia, Drew, and I'll go. So Tony, gosh, this was a lot of fun. So Wolfen, what are your final thoughts?
I mean, I think it's this is a movie that definitely, like, nostalgia didn't color it. As far as I think it was the opposite for me. Like, seeing so many elements as an adult, like, it's not the perfect movie. The cast carries a lot of it. I now really kind of would love to just tear into a 4-hour cut just to see what ended up on the cutting room floor. Like, I would be fascinated. Not that we need that, but I would be, I would watch that in chunks. That would be cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I said, I think it's got a lot more going on than I ever gave it credit for. What I really remembered was, like, oh, it wasn't really werewolves, as a kid. But I thought it was interesting, right? Like, it's fascinating, but there's a lot of layers that it wasn't a werewolf movie that I think a younger generation is going to enjoy in that way. I think it does behoove you to be a little older, than I was when I saw it. I mean, when it first came out, I guess I was 8 or yeah. So, like, seeing it now, I was just fascinated by the technology pieces. Again, like we just talked about, the Albert Finney's character. Again, by the way, if you want to see Gregory Hines and doing some more kind of being cool Gregory Hines, like White Knights comes out in '85, which is
That's what I was gonna
great.
say. That's
Yeah,
one of my favorite movies of all time. I've seen that movie so many times.
it's good.
I
Like,
love Mikhail Baryshnikov, and like,
yeah,
I have such a crush.
yeah. I bet you want to continue that journey. White Knights is there. I haven't checked on how available it is, but I assume it's out there somewhere. But yeah, I'm glad we covered it. It's got a lot of gore as well. Like, as far as a horror movie goes, it ticks a lot of the boxes. Yeah, I think it's well worth your time. But as a time capsule and an interesting film full of what happens to be kind of prescient stuff. I mean, and as I've grown older, also, like, anytime the spirits are sticking it to the man.
Yeah.
I have a certain newfound love for the supernatural sticking it to the man.
Yeah.
So, I dig it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Julia, what are your thoughts?
I mean, it's definitely firmly grounded in the 80s, there's no question, but it is artful in its 80s-ness. As far as, all the things we've talked about, and good performances. Not particularly, it holds up okay as far as, social stuff, because like we've been talking about, there's a lot of social messaging about, well, I don't know. I'm not going to speak for whether or not it treats American Indians well. I mean, I wouldn't say, but I feel like, it could have been a lot more disrespectful to a lot of populations. There is random black homeless dude that is horribly murdered, but there's also Gregory Hines, who is like so I mean, I don't know. I kind of feel like it's not as objectionable as some of the things because there's a lot of things that we've shown our kids because we've been like, oh, I used to love this movie, and then we watch it and we're like, oh my god, this movie is like so inappropriate. And I just didn't feel that way about this one, aside from the gore, of course. But I didn't feel like I wasn't constantly going, oh my gosh.
I mean, I think there's definitely we could have done a lot deeper discussion on, Native American representation in this film.
Exactly.
Like, it goes, like, it's of a time.
Yeah.
And there's even some commentary in there. Like, there's a lot to be said. I mean, also, by the way, and I hope I don't mean to step on you, but I think we should also give kudos to Diane Venora's Rebecca Neff, because she's awesome in this movie. Like,
Yeah.
she's a great partner and foil for Albert Finney throughout. She's
Agreed.
really good in this. The cast is just superb.
Yeah. So yeah, it was fun, and it was a really interesting conversation. Really, lots to talk about in this movie. This is one of the few that Jason didn't go, well, I don't know how we're gonna fill an hour, and then we ended up talking for 3 hours.
Yeah. Thank you. Drew, what about you?
I enjoyed the conversation, obviously. I think that, as I said in my opening thoughts, underrated movie. I hope our discussion might lead people who have written it off to maybe revisit it and give it another chance, because I do think it is a really interesting example. It's not, if you go in expecting a werewolf movie, it's not a good werewolf movie. But if you go in watching it as a creatures on the loose eco horror movie, I think it's a great version of that. And maybe give it a chance in that lens.
Wonderful. Thank you. I don't have much to add to that. Other than that, I really, really enjoyed discussing this film, and it made me think of a lot of other stuff. And I was so happy. And I do want to dig into. We might just. I don't know if we'll actually do this, but it would be really neat to do an episode where we just look at like what was on HBO around the time this was on, and do we remember it or do we not, and is there anything to learn from it? So cool stuff. All right, let's get our endorsements. Like, what have you been listening to, watching, whatever you want to share. And we start with Tony. Tony, has anything been on your mind that you've been watching?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of 80s coming back around, Shogun
Oh
on
yeah,
Hulu is super solid. As a person who watched it as a kid, and then later when it came back on, where I could appreciate it more, and then also read the book. This new adaptation is so far just really solid, and it's kind of interesting to kind of compare and contrast on that. I watched a bunch of other stuff. Some of it didn't stick as well. I'm also super happy Godzilla got Best VFX last night for the Oscars. I didn't really watch the Oscars, but the fact that my beloved Godzilla got some recognition was pretty awesome.
Did you watch the them get the award? Like go up and get it?
No. I need to go back and I
Oh my
haven't.
gosh, it was so cute because they all had different Godzilla figures with them. And cameras and stuff. It was so cute. It was the most adorable thing ever. And then like they get up there and they have like their Godzillas in their hands, and then they're getting the trophy. And then he's trying to like look at his speech. The guy who was so he's
Yeah.
like, "Here, hold my Godzilla." It was so cute.
This
I
was
saw the
gold.
Godzilla and I saw pictures. And did you see that they have amazing Godzilla shoes?
No, I didn't see that. That's so funny.
Look it up. It's like, and then the company was like, "Hey, we might make these for real." I'm like, "Oh, I don't think I can afford them, but I kind of want them."
So cute.
Yeah, it was that crew. Every time I've seen them do a Q&A together, and every time, like, I hope that nothing tarnishes that, because how they've portrayed, like how they've gone through everything as this kind of as -1, it's kind of made the rounds, has been just really great. I hope for many more, and even if they don't, like, whatever they do in the future, I'm down with, because I think they really like the enjoyment of it, and that's the spirit. Like, whenever I go to a festival, whenever I've seen people, that the spirit, one thing I love is like the Q&A where the true spirit of creation is up there. That's just amazing. I just, it's so, as a person who wants to create art, and anytime I see that, it just bolsters me. That's amazing. I'll have to go back and watch that. Thanks for that tip. Yeah, we were watching other stuff. Yeah, I'm sure there's a few other things that we've been watching. But Shogun's the one that sticks in my mind. So
Awesome. Julia, what about you?
Yeah, no, we haven't watched Shogun yet, but the trailer looks fantastic. Jason, I'm sure is gonna want to endorse this, but I'm gonna take it. We went to see a movie called YOLO, which is a Chinese film based on a Japanese film, originally a Japanese film, about a young woman who is depressed, overweight, kind of aimless in her life, and discovers boxing and transforms over a year into like the most super fit you can be. And it was really neat film, really moving. And the actual actor actually did this transformation herself. So during the closing credits, they actually show just like kind of, outtakes from her training. It was so inspirational. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Anyway, really great film, really neat characters, neat story. Like her family's
It was
hilarious.
just released a few days ago. This is a brand new
Yeah, it's brand new
Sony release here in the
theater.
United States. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I need
So
to see that.
yeah, you'll
Yeah.
love it. So that's mine, and probably Jason.
No, I was not. I'm glad you mentioned it. She starts out, she can't really jog, she can't really lift. And by the time, first of all, it unabashedly uses the Rocky theme as in one of the
Yeah.
montages,
And the
where
montage, yeah.
it covers an entire year. So you reach this point after she's been training for like 8 months where she's doing these like flying push-ups where she can like just
Mm-hmm.
press herself and she just takes into the
Yeah,
air.
think G.I. Jane. No,
Yeah.
I kept saying I need a montage the whole time. I was stuck on the
Yes.
Team America song.
Yeah. It's amazing. Really amazing. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry to talk on top of you, Julia. True. What about you?
Well, recently DC Comics, I guess as a way to plug the incoming Creature Commandos TV show, did a collection of all the Grant Morrison penned Frankenstein comics from a few years ago. And I picked that up as to have something to read on a plane when I recently traveled to Florida. And I had forgotten how much I loved this particular version of Frankenstein, who is also a super secret agent in the DC universe and quotes Milton and says amazing stuff like "I am Frankenstein, the undead prince of vengeance," and all the sort of craziness that only Grant Morrison could probably get away with. But also, it just made me realize that, as a creator, because this is considered an incredibly minor work by as far as Morrison is concerned, but the sort of nuggets that he leaves behind for other, or they, I should say, leaves behind for other people to use later on, because DC is still using this version of Frankenstein, and it's seemingly going to be this version of Frankenstein in the Creature Commandos TV show. And I think the fact, when you're dealing with a writer that is having to work under the sort of pressures that working in a shared universe like DC would be, but like knowing that you're going to be giving stuff that people still use down the line, that's kind of cool. I also, this isn't really a genre thing, but the other night, Jamie and I checked out American Fiction, and I have to say, like, I loved this movie so much. I mean, Jeffrey Wright is one of my favorite actors working, but I'm not normally the sort of person that would gush over a dramedy quite like this. But I think it really cut deep into some stuff about the publishing industry that needed a good-natured poking at, but also this sort of long overdue satire of the sort of self-congratulatory culture that a certain kind of left winger is, and I say this as a left winger.
Sure.
That also was a long overdue conversation that needed to be had. And so I think this movie is great if you're viewing it from its satirical lens, but I also think that if you're a creative and you find yourself frustrated with aspects of whatever industry you're in, like, you'll find a lot of commonality in this.
Well, we loved it, and the director Cord Jefferson actually won an Oscar.
I don't give a shit about Oscars, but he
got recognized, so good for him.
He got recognized. I guess I think that's cool. But it definitely is a great movie, and great acting, great cast. So I guess it deserves all the accolades it could get. But yeah, that's what I was into this week.
Yeah, I'm with you there too.
I was not watching the Oscars. saw referenced and decided I needed to watch right away this 1973 horror film called Messiah of Evil, which got released in a number of different titles along the way, and including Revenge of the Living Dead and various other just made up names. But it was filmed in Malibu in 1973, I think this was. And it's just a very, very strange film about this woman who goes investigating the disappearance of her father, who was an artist on the beach, and she discovers that the little beach town that he lived in has been gradually been taken over by sort of zombies, but they're just very peculiar zombies. It has basically all the zombies wear suits, and there are some terrifying scenes in it, and I'd never heard of this movie before, so I was really excited to make that discovery, and it was called Messiah of Evil. And I also wanted to recommend this book that I'm sure I've mentioned before, but I was just using it this week and I love it. It's called Ad Nauseum, which is just an enormous, wonderful collection of newspaper movie listings from like the 70s and 80s, horror in
Oh, I love
particular.
that.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's so good.
I just have such like I remember visiting my grandparents and every week, like every day, certainly every week, looking through the
Yeah.
what's coming to the theaters, and some of it with just descriptions, some of it with like posters. On Sundays, I guess was the biggest because you got like the poster size ads.
It's the kind of thing
That's
that
awesome.
I can literally, as a grown man, that I can just like lay down on the floor and read this book. It is
Yeah,
so nice to just flip through and look at these newspaper listings. I love it.
I'm gonna
So
also Messiah Evil. I watched not too long ago either. Like I just randomly caught it. Like, oh, well, that's in the suggested for you category.
yes,
And I've trained it. That's one of the very few areas where I've trained the internet that yes, in fact, the what's for you is working for me.
it's pretty darn correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
Boy,
there's a couple of services where their suggestions are like, yes, of course you know me. Thank
yeah.
you.
It is so odd, and it's the kind of odd that I love. So I'm so glad that I got a chance to watch this. So that was what I was watching instead of the Oscars. I got no disrespect for the Oscars. I just was like, I had to see about a 1973 zombie movie, and that's the way it went. So everybody, thank you so much. We will be back soon. I don't know with what, but undoubtedly it will be fascinating. And come to the Facebook page. Let us know what you thought. If you have explanations for Messiah of Evil, I want to hear them. We will talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.